Hello, and welcome to our quiet little hideaway. Today we are going to be going over whiskey, the 7 types of whiskey, and what really makes whiskey a whiskey. As you can see here, I've got a few bottles lined up. So we're going to be trying 7 different types of whiskey today. And that's really what makes up the umbrella term of whiskey. So whiskey really is an umbrella term. Anything distilled from cereal grains, corn, barley, malt, wheat, any of those can be then aged and become whiskey. So we are going to take a trip across the world today. We're going to start up north of us, come down into the US, and then fly across the pond. So stay tuned, here we go. First up, we are going to go up to Canada. So when it comes to whiskeys, Canadian whiskey is one of the wild, wild west. They don't have the rules that bourbons do, that scotches do, that any of the other regions of whiskey have. So in Canada, they make what they can, they make what they want, and they don't have any reservations about it. So today we're going to drink Crown Royal. One, because it's the quintessential Canadian whiskey. They go through 10,000 bushels of corn a day, and they go through 3.4 million liters of water a day. They produce a crap ton of whiskey up in Canada. And then as long as it's aged at least 3 years and made within the region of Canada, it's Canadian whiskey. So most of them are blends. They take those blends. Ooh, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But there's toffee, there's vanilla, there's good stuff on this nose. Yeah. We've got lots of different Canadian whiskeys here at the Shebeen, but this one is what we're going to try because it is, like I said, the quintessential Canadian whiskey. Ooh, there is a little bit of toffee. Get some oak. Ooh. Some little higher notes of apple and mint. Yeah. So, yeah. See, I like the end. The end of Canadian whiskey. It's a little spicy, but it's still got that custard note, that mouthfeel that kind of coats everything to it. So as we go through here, I'm going to try things, I'm going to teach things, but one thing you'll see every time, I'm going to lift the glass up to the light. I'm going to see just how light it is. So that creates, with your eyes, the first bias when it comes to whiskey. It's darker, it's lighter. Most times, if it's darker, it's going to be a little more aged, so you're going to expect a lot more oak. You're going to expect a lot more of those vanillins. But, yeah, and then we're going to smell it. So, moving on to the next one. We'll talk about the smell on this next one. So, down, coming into the U.S., we're not quite as far south as Kentucky, but we're going to Tennessee. So Tennessee whiskey, if that's the right way, can be considered a bourbon, but bourbon cannot be considered a Tennessee whiskey. So a rectangle is a square, but a square is not a rectangle, or vice versa. A rectangle is not a square. That's it. Anyways, so with Tennessee whiskey, it's at least 51% corn, aged for at least 2 years to be considered straight. But what they do in Tennessee is the Lincoln County process. So they have done a process where they take sugar maple charcoal and they filter the juice through it before it goes to aging. So this, they say, gives it a little bit more sweetness to it, gives it a little bit better mouthfeel, just more refined of a product. Basically, I think they were just giving a middle finger to Kentucky and saying, hey, we can make stuff too. But we'll give this a shot here. Now, the Jack Daniels, so they do 80% corn. So they are very heavily corn with 12% rye and 8% malt to kind of round out that mash bill. So you're going to get a little bit of spice with the sweetness, but it's going to be mostly sweetness. So we look at it. It's dark. It's beautiful. It's thick and lovely. Now, the nose. We can get our little schnoz in there. Get a very well breath, but be sure to breathe out. You can do a drive-by. Woo. Or just kind of a little Woo. So, nose is important. I love to get my nose right in there. Get that honey, get that brown sugar, get all those tasty notes in there. But then breathe out. So, your taste, your smell, I'll go back to the same olfactory center in the middle of your head. And so you experience things both with taste and smell. So we are going to taste it now. Proofier, definitely proofier than the Crown Royal. Getting a whole lot of oak, getting a whole lot of cinnamon and smoke, a lot of smoke. So guess I hadn't really had the smoke as much in previous. So with the barrel proof and they don't cut it down, we might get more of that charcoal flavor. But definitely a little bit of maple sweetness on that too. Sorry. I'm enjoying this. So yeah, it's a little tougher to talk. Finishes out with that rye pepper, sweetness of vanilla. Yeah, right? Jack Daniels did well. Yeah, and as far as Tennessee whiskey goes, kind of like Crown Royal, Jack Daniels is the quintessential Tennessee whiskey. There are others out there. We have others on the shelf, but for this purpose, for this video, this is the one we're going to talk about. All right, let's move down to Kentucky. So, I would argue that bourbon is the most highly regulated spirit on the planet. There are so many stinking rules that go along with bourbon that it makes it tough to distinguish, to be creative. However, a lot of distillers definitely make their stuff different. 51% corn, so that's bottom line. The other 49% could be made up of wheat, barley, rye, any of those other cereal grains that could get even more creative. Don't know. To be considered a straight bourbon has to be aged at least 2 years. And anything less than 4 years definitely has to have an age statement on the bottle there. So Four Roses makes an amazing product. They are amazing at what they do. So this is not a bottle and bond. So let's circle back for a second to the rules. You've heard of bottle and bond bourbon. That's an additional 4 rules placed on bourbon whiskey. So that it has to be aged for 4 years in a government warehouse. Has to be at least bottled at 100 proof even. Has to be made all in the same season, unblended. Just all that together. That was created to keep people safe because there was a whole bunch of whiskey out there that was a little iffy, to say the least. So we're going to try this Four Roses here. Yeah, these guys. So medium amber color, not too bad. Oh, so sweet, so good on the nose. Check that bottle out too. That bottle is freaking cool. Yeah, kind of hid me scrolling through my notes. I'm not smart enough to remember all these notes. Come on. But spice, dark fruit. Four Roses has been in production since 1888. They're one of the few distilleries that was able to produce medicinal whiskey during Prohibition. So they've been in operation from when they first opened their doors back in 1888. Not many whiskey producers in the U.S. can say that. But I got a little dark fruit, almost cherry, vanilla, definitely. Has caramel, sweetness, goodness, but ooh, finishes off a little spice. Oh, but it's so floral in the end. There's that cherry coming back again. Oh, and cinnamon. So bourbons like this I love because they're additive. They go layer upon layer upon layer, and every time you take a sip, it just adds something else into your mouth. And the small batch is fun too because they use a different yeast than their other bourbons. So it creates just a slightly different profile. Thinking more on that floral, that cherry that I get in this that I don't get as much in their other ones. Yeah, that's good. So bourbon, the American whiskey, now allowed to be made anywhere in the U.S. Didn't used to be. So that's a new regulation. So here in Iowa now, we can have some straight bourbon whiskey as long as they're aged for 2 years, at least 51% corn, and follow all the other rules. Not bottled to over 125 proof, or not. I'm sorry, not barreled to over 125 proof, and not distilled to over 94 point something. Doesn't really matter. Just retain some of the character of the grain. All right, we're gonna go to rye. So rye could be Canadian rye, could be Vermont rye like this. It's made all over in the U.S. So rye, especially in the north, grows very well. So that's what farmers were able to produce whiskey with. Rye truly is a pain in the butt to mash. It turns into almost like this mucusy, concretey type substance. So not many people do rye, and definitely not many people do rye well. So that's why you see these producers out in Indiana making a whole lot of rye whiskey for everybody else, because they have the expertise, they have the equipment, they have the know-how. No shade on them. They make good product. They make good juice in Indiana. But Whistle Pig came on the scene 2007, and they aim to make everything from their estate up in Vermont. They want to grow all their grain there. They want to do all the production there. They want to do all the body. They want to do everything in-house, which is extremely admirable. But as far now, they make their 10-year stuff is starting to be all that estate produced stuff, and done very, very well. So personally, I love rye. I love that spice. I love the feeling of it. So yeah, we're looking. This is a lighter amber color. Kind of lighter than I would have expected for a 10-year, but it's a sweetness on the nose. I'm getting a little apple. Let me see. Yeah. Butterscotch. All right, let's taste it. So, we see the whiskey. We smell the whiskey. We taste the whiskey. And especially with the rye, you feel the whiskey. So, rye's got that pepperness, that bite that hits the side of your tongue, hits the tip of your tongue. It provides those grassier notes that bourbon just doesn't. Some of the high rye bourbons do. They like that complexity, but rye whiskey is a beast on its own. I love to make cocktails with rye because it stands out. It is something different. It has that character that it will stand up against citrus. It will stand up against liqueurs and vermouths and things that you put into it. And you'll always get that feel. That's pretty darn good. Yeah, love me some rye whiskey. Not a lot to talk about other than, yeah, it's delicious. It's made with at least 51% rye versus the 51% corn. So it really leans in heavy to those earthy notes, to those rye notes. Drink water. Alrighty, moving on to the Irish. So, not everybody is a whiskey fan. Not everybody enjoys whiskey. So, whiskey, cereal grains can have a bad impression in some people's minds here in the U.S., especially if they're drinking that really bad blended stuff. So, start them out with an Irish whiskey. So, Irish whiskey, arguably, I will argue, is the easiest drinking whiskey out there. It doesn't have the corn, the wheat, the barley, the rye. It has only barley. So similar to Scotch in the recipe that it's just water, barley, yeast. That's all that goes in it. The Irish, kind of like the Tennessee whiskey, gave a little middle finger to Scotland when they started producing stuff. So they will include some already pre-malted barley into their recipes, which is a no-go in Scotland. So with the Irish whiskey, check out that color. This is 7 to 10 years old. Oop. And it is got a light golden color to it. So not a whole lot of color. Yeah. And the Mitchell and Sons alone is a cool story. So they started out as a bakery and a confectionery, then decided to make wine. They were making 100 barrels of sherry a year. And then they got into the whiskey game. So they took some of those sherry casks that they were, and then they would age their whiskey in it. And then that's the story with the green spot, the yellow spot, the red spot, the blue spot. So those are, in lack of better terms, age statements for their whiskeys. So the green spot, 7 to 10 years. Yellow spot, I think 11 to 14. Red spot, anything over 15 years. So that's how they mark their barrels. Just a simple splotch of paint on the barrel. And that's how they knew what age was in that barrel. So really cool. But let's taste it. So we got light gold color. Oh, so Irish whiskey with the barley. So many tree fruits, so much apple, so much pear, so much sweetness. So it's a whole lot easier on the palate. Oh, I could smell this all day. This is like a candle that you want in your office. Just apples and pears and a little bit of vanilla mixed in. Now on the palate, super smooth. Super light, so not heavy, not overly oaky. Get a little bit of coconut, get that vanilla from the barrel, but really fruity, really light. So I don't like to make cocktails with Irish whiskey because it's so light and fruity. There are definitely some cocktails that it goes amazing in, but a lot of Irish whiskeys will get covered up in a lot of cocktails. So you do a little more of the blendeds with Jameson, things like that. They're fine. Do an Irish Maid. That drink is good though. With the cucumber, muddle it up. Saint Germain, so good. But Irish whiskey for somebody who's getting into the whiskey game, try it neat. Try it. Just maybe with a drop or two, but really excellent whiskey to start people on. All right, we are getting down to the wire here. We've done 5 already. Yep, it is 10 a.m. and I'm already 5 drinks deep. Woohoo! All right, we're going to go to Scotland. Now, Scotch is a category of whiskey onto its own. There are regions of Scotland that do things very, very differently. However, they all start with the same recipe. They all start with water, barley, yeast. That's it. They can't use acidulated malt. They can't use anything else. It is very, very regulated what goes into Scotch. But you look at a Scotch wall, you look at our Scotch bottle, we've got dozens of bottles that are all different colors, are all different styles, are all different flavors. Mostly because they come from different regions of Scotland, the 5 key regions, or they are treated differently after they are produced. But along with similar to Irish, what you're going to get is a lot of fruit notes on it. This one, the Balvenie Doublewood, so it's aged for at least around 12 years in an ex-American bourbon cask. And then it's finished for about 9 months in a sherry cask. So that's going to give it a lot of the fruitiness, the lightness of a wine. But you're still going to get that vanilla, that oak, and you get a bit of sherry. So this one's been open now for probably about half an hour. So a lot of the light notes of the sherry are a little gone, but there they are on the palate. So there is a little bit of peat. A lot of people are scared of Scotch. They think, oh, they're all going to be peat bombs. They're all going to be gross. No, that's mostly just the Islay region of Scotland. This one's from the Speyside. So up on the northeast of the island. There's a little bit of salinity. I've heard a story that they age all their barrels in the caves along the seaside, and they're going to bring in that salty air and and it's going to give it some of that sea salt flavor. I taste a little of it. I taste that salinity, but yeah, Scotch in general, great. Don't be afraid of it. Try things from the Highlands. Try things from the Speyside. Even the Lowlands versions of Scotch or the Campbelltown produce amazing Scotch if you don't want the peat bombs from the Islay regions. So Balvenie Doublewood, great, quintessential. What a Scotch should taste like. A little bit of peat, a lot of fruit, a lot of sherry. Absolutely delicious. So moving on to the very last whiskey of today's, mostly because I got to get going after this and still be productive today. We are going with Japanese whiskey. So Japanese whiskey has been, well, the Suntory distillery has been in operation since 1899. So much longer than most distilleries all distilleries in the U.S., save a few. Pretty much all but one or two in Ireland. I mean, Scotch whiskey's been around even, so they're older. But when they started producing wine, they started producing whiskey. They were doing things with a little bit questionable methods in Western terms, so they weren't desirable to those of us in the U.S., to those in Europe. It's more recently that they've started reverse engineering Scotch and producing whiskeys that way. They are doing good. So while they're old in their distilleries, they're really new on the market. They've been making amazing whiskeys now by basically doing what Scotland's doing, Ireland's doing. Oh, really light, really easy on the nose. Fruity. It's got a little bit of pepperness. It's got a little bit of spice, but easy drinking, complete whiskey. Again, with a lot of Japanese whiskeys, don't recommend making cocktails with them. They don't have enough outstanding character. They're outstanding. They don't have enough outstanding character to stand up to citrus, to liqueurs, to vermouths. So definitely drink them neat. All right, drink more water. So we have done the umbrella of whiskey today. We started in Canada, moved down to the U.S., moved across the pond to Ireland, to Scotland, and then even to Japan. So this kind of summarized a little bit. Whiskey is that umbrella term. So anything distilled with cereal grains, as we talked. Huge variety of possibilities, of capabilities when it comes to distillers moving into the whiskey game. So we will talk at later dates more about Scotch, breaking that down. Japanese, breaking some of those down. Definitely breaking down the bourbons, the bottles of Mons, those type of whiskeys. Irish is even fun to break down. Doing the single malts, the triple pot distilled, the different single grain whiskeys from Ireland. One thing we probably won't touch again, pretty much, Canadian whiskey. Not because I don't like it. There's just not a lot to talk about. There's not any definitive categories within it, so it's not as fun. So thank you for joining today. This is our first video. This is a fun video, and we have talked about whiskey, which is what we enjoy. Thank you for joining us at our quiet little hideaway, and see you next time. Bye.